Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teenaccounts.
If data management is slowing down your business, you need the Intuit ERP. If one entity is here, and one here, and one here, and one here, you need the Intuit ERP. If scaling your business feels like starting over, you need the Intuit ERP. Intuit Enterprise Suite is the AI-native ERP solution that consolidates, migrates, and automates, all in one place. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
Always look to the sky. The Dr.Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Welcome once again to your weekend, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening, of course, to the Powerhouse Blowtorch, warming up the airwaves here on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Proudly broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City, to the nation and the world. Great guest, as you tell us, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Dr. Sky Experience. We certainly have lots to talk about in our 2-hour show as we continue to explore many of the great mysteries of the universe. And if you're a first-time listener, thank you for your interest not only in this station, where you can hear 24/7, without a doubt, some of the best broadcasters in the nation, and if not, around the world. Our conversations normally talk about subjects in astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. And to get in on the conversation, always, the numbers are 1-800-848-9222, and simpler dialing is 1-800-848-WABC. Welcome to the Theater of the Mind, tonight's episode, and tonight's adventure. In the Theater of the Mind, we continue to talk about some exceptional stories and those who live those stories in the world of ufology. And in just a few moments, we're going to meet a retired United States Air Force captain, Robert Salas, on a most amazing story, ladies and gentlemen, with your questions and comments about how an entire flight of nuclear Minuteman missiles could somehow, back in 1967, be shut down from something that came by and left with the speed of light. A very interesting story. And a thanks to our helmsmen, both Tony and Bill, who navigate this powerhouse signal, their hand on the pulse of the power, making sure that it's heard far and wide, as we say, not only here in some 173 countries, all 50 states, but how about that? I'm sure, even out to the cosmos. And to set the stage, let's continually discuss that as an introduction, a brief one as it is, for our special guest. The question is, does the public have a right to be informed about the possible existence of UFOs and the suspicious events that coincide with their supposed presence? How would access to such knowledge affect our society? What responsibility does the government have in learning about UFOs in an effort to protect society? There are many types and questions that authors Robert Salas and James Klotz attempt to answer in a book entitled Faded Giant. They explore this incidence of unidentified aerial phenomenon and its proximity to Maelstrom Air Force Base, which is near Grand Falls, Montana, and the unexplainable shutdown of nearly 20 nuclear missiles that occurred. Their mission is to provide the public with accurate information surrounding the events that took place at Maelstrom Air Force Base back in 1967. An amazing story. And let's now go to a clip that we can listen to that sets the stage for our guest, an interview with retired United States Air Force Captain Robert Salas. And it sounds like this.
It happens in 1967 at Maelstrom Air Force Base in Montana. Nick is on his way to meet a key witness to the event. Robert Salas served 7 years in the Air Force, rising to the rank of captain.
So tell me what happened.
March 24th, 1967, I and my commander, Fred Mywalt, were on duty at Roy, Montana.
The men are stationed in the missile launch bunker, 60 feet below ground.
We had control of 10 nuclear missiles. The Minuteman won. Each missile had an 800 kiloton nuclear weapon.
If ordered, it's Salas' job to launch the warheads.
I was on alert status. In other words, my commander, Fred, was taking a little nap break. Sometime in the early morning hours, I get a call.
Salas.
On the other end of the phone is a terrified guard stationed above the bunker.
He's screaming into the phone. He's yelling, "Sir, I'm looking at the front gate. I see this glowing red object."
The strange red object is moving like nothing the guards have ever seen before.
They were flying very fast across the sky, stopping on a dime, reversing course, making 90-degree angle turns, making no noise. These guys were very, very frightened. It was a critical situation.
As fear spreads above ground, things are about to get even more terrifying below.
I need you to wake up. I've got the weirdest...
Salas wakes his commander and tells him the guard's report of a UFO above the base. Suddenly, the unthinkable happens.
And with that, let us welcome our special guest in hour number one of the Dr. Sky Experience, retired United States Air Force Captain Robert Salas. Captain, thank you for joining us. A very interesting story that needs to be spoken about, and we're honored to have you. How are you this morning?
Hi, Dr. Sky. I'm doing fine. Anytime people want to hear about my story, I'm ready to talk about it because you're right. The public has a need to know and should know about not only my story, but other similar stories.
Absolutely. Just to set the stage, it appears that interview that we ran just an excerpt from was Nick Pope, a very qualified UFO researcher. That goes back, a number of years ago, sir, if I'm right?
You know, I can't remember when I talked to Nick Pope, but it's been many years, yes.
Let's talk about you as a member of the military. Your passion for the United States, it's a very interesting profession to be part of that, as they call them, the missileers. Talk about that special duty, because it's not for everyone. And just to describe what's happening down below in those bunkers, people still to this day obviously are doing this job. Describe how you got involved in that so we set the stage for what happened above ground.
Well, in 1965, I was told that there was a need for missileers to man the nuclear weapons program that we had. We were building up. Of course, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962.
Yes.
When the first Minuteman actually was brought online. But they wanted to build up a force of missile launch officers, and they actually offered a chance to increase my education. At the same time, they had that program as part of it, so I volunteered and was accepted and went through about a year's training, and then became a missile launch officer, I think, in October of 1966.
Yes. It's very interesting, and it's not duty that I think everybody can handle psychologically. Are there special tests, I would imagine, that people have to go through? And I'm being very conservative on that one, because you have at your fingertip, you and your partner, the ability to take out a good portion of the world if ordered to do so by these things. I imagine they're called EWOs, emergency war orders, right? I mean, you have a lot of responsibility.
Yes, and I don't know exactly what kind of investigation they did about our backgrounds, but you're right. We all had to be fairly stable individuals. No crazies.
Yeah.
And we did, at the time, actually, my commander and I, just the two of us in the capsule at one time, had the ability to arm and launch missiles. I think they've got more safeguards now, but at that time, we were free to do that. If one or both of us went a little nuts, but thankfully we did not.
Thank God, right. You see in a lot of Hollywood movies where there's this, emotional thing going on because they were checking to see that those war orders are validated. They open up the box, and obviously it looks like one person doesn't want to turn the key, and then in Hollywood somebody pulls out a revolver and says you're going to turn it or whatever. But it's a lot more serious than that. And here in Arizona, not to do the PR for Arizona, if anybody hasn't been down to the Titan Missile Museum in southern Arizona, you'll get an example, as you know, sir, of a Titan missile with a 9-megaton deactivated. They didn't keep the warhead in there. But just to see what you folks did down there underground, I mean, it can get pretty lonely, and obviously the best of the best. But, Captain, in this short time we have here, and I want to promote the number for people that may have questions about this incredible story. It's 1-800-848-9222, or simply dial 1-800-848-WABC. Tell us about that night. Let's go back in the time machine to March 24th, 1967. You're at Malmstrom Air Force Base. This is deep inside of Montana. Tell us the story from there. We'd like to hear this.
Okay, I was on alert status. My commander was taking a rest break because we were down there for 24 hours, and one of us had to be fully alert at all times. So it was his turn for the break, and first I get a phone call, and it was sometime in the evening, not the morning. It was probably something around 9 o'clock. It was dark outside, and we had a main guard that called down and said he's been seeing strange lights in the sky above the facility. And by the way, this facility is about 100 miles from Great Falls, Montana, or Malmstrom Air Force Base.
Right, pretty desolate. Right.
To the east. And the facility was called a launch control facility. It looked like a farmhouse in the middle of a wheat field from outside. But at any rate, he said he's been seeing strange lights flying very fast, stopping in midair, reversing course immediately, making 90-degree turns, no engine noise, and he kept saying, "These are not airplanes, sir." And he kept repeating that. I mean, he didn't want to use the word UFO, even though
yes,
we had sightings in the city of Great Falls that week that were written up in the newspaper. People reporting these strange lights. At any rate, he kept repeating, "These are not aircraft. These are not aircraft." Well, I just wanted to report it, so I thanked him for the report. I said, "Let me know if anything more interesting happens." And we hung up the phone. And then 5 minutes later, he calls back and says, well, this time he's screaming into the phone. He's very frightened. It's clearly he's babbling. He's not making any sense. But he did say, "I've got all the guards out, pointed at this red-orange glowing light that's hovering above the front gate." The front gate was about, I'd say, 50 feet away from his location, but he has a big window. You could see the front gate.
Yes.
And scared to death, wanted me to tell him what to do next. And, of course, I had no idea what to tell him because we were never trained for anything like this. But it sounded serious because, well, the guards were freaked out, and we were concerned that someone was trying to get inside the fenced area. And so I told him to do what he had to do in order to keep anybody out of the fenced area of our facility.
Right, including the red ball that's moving around outside. Right, there you go.
Yeah, keep that out. So
please keep it out, and I mean it. Right, there you go. Under no underestimation, keep it out. Right, there you go.
So I hung up the phone. I went to tell my commander about the phone calls, And just as I was about to describe the phone calls to him, we get a large horn sound in the capsule. We're 60 feet underground. Mm-hmm. And by the way, we have all the equipment underground to operate the missiles, and they had no possible way upstairs where the guards were to instigate some kind of a prank or affect the missiles in any way. But we get this horn going off, and we jump up, and sure enough, one of the missiles went into an unlaunchable condition. It went from green to red, which meant it could not be launched. And then very shortly after that, the rest of the missiles followed suit. They all went red, and we lost all 10. By lost, I mean they were disabled. They couldn't be launched.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing this. This is an incredible testimony here. Our special guest in this hour is a very interesting gentleman, as you're hearing him testify about a story that he was part of back on March the 24th, 1967, Malmstrom Air Force Base. His book, by the way, you can get a copy of this book called Fated Giant. And, sir, I'm taking liberty to say this from your book. Fated Giant is when, a nuclear weapon goes offline. Exactly what happened to you folks. An incredible story. Please continue, because this is amazing. You're trying to keep the red ball out, but the red ball wants to do its own thing.
Well, apparently it did. We had a way of querying the system to find out what was wrong with the missiles. It's like a feedback loop that it was on, and it read out guidance and control system failure on each of the missiles. So there was a failure of the guidance system, and because of that, those missiles could not be launched. Now, this has never happened before. This is a very reliable system. I was there for 3 years as a launch officer and never had that kind of an indication from any event in that 3 years. Mm-hmm. And we also had 2 indications of a possible incursion or entry into where the missiles were actually located, which was about a mile or 2 away from our position. And those were called launch facilities. And we had to send, I had to call back up to the guard and send security people out there to check those locations about a mile away.
Incredible.
When they got out there, they saw the objects again. By the way, I asked him about that red light over the front gate, of course, and he said it had just left. So it was there when the missiles went down. So we did send guards out to the 2 other facilities where we had these incursion lights, and they again saw these objects over the missile sites. And they were too frightened to go forward because we had no explanation for any of this. And so we brought them back. But the next morning, we were ordered back to the base immediately. I tried to talk to the main guard, but he wouldn't speak to me, and later realized that he had been ordered not to speak to me any longer about this.
And this is what, from the higher command in the Air Force, or some other, who knows, some other agency of the government? We
well, they had their own squadron command structure. But when we got to the base, we were ordered to our squadron commander's office, and in there was a man from AFOSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and my squadron commander, an old B-17 pilot from World War II. So he had seen a lot during the war, and he was white as a sheet. First thing I said to him was, what the hell's going on? Was this some kind of an Air Force exercise?
Yeah, it sounds like something, but probably not from this world, right?
He said absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't explain what had occurred. None of us could explain it. And the guy from AFOSI says, sign here. So we were ordered basically to sign a non-disclosure statement saying we would never speak to anyone, including anyone in the Air Force, about what occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And that was effective. It had no expiration date.
But you're brave enough to tell the story here on this radio station on the Dr. Sky Experience. No, I appreciate being serious, sir. This is amazing.
Well,
For people out there that have never heard this story, just a reminder, who is on the Dr. Sky Experience? If you're just joining us, retired United States Air Force Captain Robert Salas. His book, with his co-author, Fated Giant in the military jargon, it's when a nuclear missile or a missile system or a nuclear weapon goes offline. He's testifying about this, and let me jump to the kind of a fast forward because of time, and I want to make sure we get people in who may have comments and questions on this. How soon after the event did the missile systems come back online? Is that pretty much hours later, or was it days later?
Probably more like days later, but not that long. The man that actually brought the missiles back up on alert status had to retarget each missile. His crew did. Has also testified. You can hear his testimony on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
I have a YouTube channel if anybody wants to go and listen to what he has to say and others.
Sure, tell us.
That's Robert Salas at Giant Head 3 is my YouTube channel.
Yeah, this is an amazing story.
At Giant Head 3.
Amazing story because, we look at this whole UFO story, Roswell. We look at all these other so-called interceptions where the United States government claims, according to whistleblowers, and we'll get into some of that with your opinion as we move forward in this short hour. But it's incredible. Sure. You and your team witnessed this. Here's my response back, and it's not important what I say, but I'm just doing the research for this radio show. How dare the government say that it was the observation of the planet Mars? I mean, that's to me the most laughable thing I've ever heard of. I mean, I look as an astronomer, the planet Mars, it can be bright, but it doesn't hang over your gate and violate, national security. And then the other allegation is, which I don't laugh at, but I wonder how it would happen, that our government was testing a new electromagnetic pulse weapon. Your comment on both of those. The first one is rather silly, don't you think? The planet Mars caused your flight to go down, the Echo flight, to go from ready status to not available to launch. That's pretty serious.
It's pretty silly, but it was in one of the instances, I think it was at Minot Air Force Base in 1966, the head of Blue Book came out. The man was called Quintanilla, Lieutenant Colonel Quintanilla, and actually wrote that in a letter. He said it was the planet Vega or some.
There's a star like Vega, that. Right?
Star Vega. Anyway, and the other thing was that you mentioned was written up in the Wall Street Journal in June of last year. I just reviewed a copy of that, which stated that the Air Force was testing an EMP device, an electromagnetic pulse device, because during a nuclear blast, so if the enemy, for example, hit the area nearby where we were located with a nuclear weapon, either before or after we launched, it would generate a very high electromagnetic pulse. And indeed, nuclear weapons do generate electromagnetic pulse. However, and the Air Force knew this before they even, while they were designing the system, and they did test our facilities, but they never tested, and I was there for 3 years, they never tested any operational facilities.
I hear
In other
you.
words,
Yes.
they never tested where we were located because our weapons were meant to be the deterrence of any other nuclear power striking us with nuclear weapons. So those had to be online, they had to be on alert, they had to be ready to go. But these tests were done, these EMP tests were done at test locations not in Montana. And it was ridiculous to even write this up in the Wall Street Journal, even though they claimed they got this information from Arrow, which is ridiculous also. I gave a 2.5-hour presentation to Arrow in February of 2023. And at the end of that presentation, I asked if they were going to check with the Air Force on what I had told them, and they said no.
Yeah.
I said, why not?
Yeah, why not?
And he said, well, we're not getting any answers from the Air Force. We've tried to ask them questions before, and they're not responding. And as far as I know, that's the latest. I certainly have not heard from the Air Force or Arrow since. However, Arrow did write to me, and I have it in writing, that mine is an official historical report on the UAP issue, and that means to me that the U.S. Congress can get all the details of my incident, because I gave them over 21 pieces of supporting evidence and a long PowerPoint presentation. The Congress, anybody in Congress should be able to access that, since they're the ones.
And I hope they do, Captain. We're almost at the bottom of the hour, sir. Not to cut you short, I do apologize when it sounds like we're trying to squeeze everything in, but in so many words we are. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions and comments, limited time but a rare opportunity to speak with somebody that's in the know on the subject of UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, previously known and served up as UFOs, 1-800-848-9222, or how about the convenient way, 1-800-848-WABC, as we continue with your questions and comments, ladies and gentlemen. But in the next half hour with the good captain, we're going to ask him straight up, what's his opinion, because he obviously has spent his retirement years, and even years after that, or I should say before that, in discussing this with many, many people, as you've heard about reports that he's given, testimony, what the heck came out of the sky, a most amazing thing. And by the way, as you know, Captain, many of these sightings of UAPs have been centered around nuclear weapon facilities. So this is not the first of its kind, and I'm sure certainly not the last. We welcome your calls, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Dr. Sky Experience, 1-800-848-9222, or conveniently 1-800-848-WABC, and we will be right back.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, I'm Travis Walton, author of Fire in the Sky, and my experience as an abductee back in 1975. And you are listening to the Dr. Sky Show.
I happen to be privileged enough to be on the fact that we've been visited on this planet, and the UFO phenomenon is real. Words of a good friend of mine who's passed on to the infinite, Dr. Edgar Mitchell of Apollo 14, one of the original moonwalkers, as we continue, ladies and gentlemen, to speak with you, with somebody who's in the know about something about UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, retired United States Air Force Captain Robert Salas. His book with a co-author, Fated Giant. In the military parlance, the fated giant concept is when a nuclear weapon system inexplicably goes offline. Captain, appreciate your time here. This is amazing. The phone lines are lighting up here. And due respect to those that are calling, Let's go and say hello and good morning to Frank in Maine. You're on with Captain Salas. How you doing, Frank? How's Maine? How's it going in Maine?
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Sky and Captain Salas. It's a beautiful night up here in Maine. Actually, it's 59 degrees, and it's clear as skies you can ever see in your life.
Amen.
Yes, it is. It is clear. It's going to get cloudy by tomorrow, but right now it's beautiful. I want to ask Dr. Salas about the Loring Air Force Base incident and how that relates to all the other Air Force bases, Minot and Maelstrom, and how the government can actually cover these up and make it seem like it's nothing more than natural phenomena or natural occurrences that are making these things come near nuclear bases, let alone shut off nuclear sites.
Yeah. Well, Frank, it's always a privilege to have you join in on the Theater of the Mind here. But, Captain, always good people with inquisitive questions. Please continue.
Your question was about Warren Air Force Base?
Loring Air Force Base, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was the incident, and this was publicized in the news, where 50 nuclear missiles, I think these were Minuteman III, were disabled. And the Air Force came out and said that this was due to a computer glitch, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are witnesses, both military and civilian, that claim they saw an object near or over Warren Air Force Base when this happened. So it is typical that the Air Force would try to make some kind of a story up to cover up the actual events. I did want to make a statement.
Go ahead.
8 days before my incident, there was another incident very similar to mine. It was at what we call Echo Flight. Again, a two-man crew experienced the shutdown of all 10 of their missiles during UFO sightings that were reported to them by security guards and maintenance people that were on site when the missiles went down. And then in September of 1966, there was a similar incident at Minot Air Force Base. Captain David Schendel was a witness to that. And then I was told by Raymond Fowler, who I can talk about later, that in early 1966, another 10 missiles went down at Maelstrom. So within the span of about a year and a half or less, we lost 40.
That's a big number. I mean, that's incredible to hear this.
To UFO,
That's
to
amazing.
UFO incidents.
Frank in Maine, I know you were referring to Loring Air Force Base, if I'm correct, not to Warren. And again, I think the communication is the problem. But Loring is another incident, too, that where the B-36 bombers were stationed for such a long time. But, Captain, I think we generally have the idea, and Frank, always appreciate the interest of time here. We got to move forward. But thank you for being part of the Dr. Sky Experience. We appreciate you. Let's continue with the callers, Captain. The phone lines are lighting up here, as we would expect. On line number 2, let's say hi to Dennis in Washington, D.C. Dennis, good morning. Your comment about this situation.
Yes, thank you, Captain Salas. I appreciate, and I have followed you over the years. I'm familiar with what you experienced there at the base. My questions have to do with Washington, D.C. When this event happened in the Cold War era, is there any information you can share with us as to Washington's response, the Pentagon, which I'm very close to, incidentally, and how it impacted all of these other 40 missile silos on the Minuteman program?
Great question, Dennis. Captain, interesting. It goes all the way up, I'm sure, to the Pentagon and beyond.
Yeah. When I decided to go public, we wrote to the Air Force under the Freedom of Information Act to release any information they could about the Echo flight incident, which I thought was mine at the time. They said it was classified. However, they were going to declassify it, and they did send me documents, many of whom those documents are in that book, Fated Giant, the first one I wrote. And in there, one of the documents we received were from a telex from SAC headquarters to other bases within the SAC system, and with a copy to headquarters Air Force about the Echo shutdown, all 10 missiles shut down. It didn't say anything about UFOs at that point, but there was another document that I received where, quote, rumors of UFOs were, they were I'm trying to think of the right word.
Okay, take your time.
Were disproven is the word they used in this other report.
Well, the cover-up continues, ladies and gentlemen. Dennis in D.C., thank you so much for your call. We got a full board of callers here. We want to move forward. And in limited time, I want to get to ask some pertinent questions of the captain. Let's go to line number 3. Greg from Michigan, you're on the air with Captain Robert Salas. Oh, he's gone. Okay. Let's go to line number 1 and welcome a regular, Alexi in Queens. Good morning. How are you today?
Yes. Good morning, Dr. Sky. Good morning to your guest. It's a pleasure to speak to you again. I'm listening very attentively to this dialogue about the missiles going back from 50 years ago. I hate to remind people, but the control system on those sites, those rocket launch sites, the underground missile, atomic defense, or whatever, they're very archaic. I'm very familiar with this type of technology. This is my first introduction to computers, and I did it at somewhat professional level at school. The problem is that I think look at it in a different perspective. These poor people, these military people, were victims of something called St. Elmo's fire or lightning, which is an incredibly charged portion of air that can assume various shapes and move rapidly.
So, Alexi, I can hardly hear you. If you can speak a little louder. I hear what I think I'm hearing, and the captain might be hearing. You're saying it allegedly is ball lightning? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Is this better, sir?
Absolutely. Now you sound like I can hear you, and so can everyone.
Right. Anyway, this phenomenon of St. Elmo's fire, I studied that also, not deeply enough, but enough to give me a sufficient understanding that this ball lightning can assume an elongated or a spherical shape and hover in the atmosphere and move about seeking a discharge of energy. But also, as I said before, the technology back then was so primitive. They were up to 20 years ago, they were using floppy disks. You know how ancient, how archaic, dangerous, and vulnerable that made our country.
Well, Alexi, I think you made your point in the interest of time here. Again, theoretically, ball lightning, but again, you were there, Captain. So, Alexi, thank you for your call. Let the captain explain, please.
Not only I was there, but Boeing sent a team to investigate, and they eliminated lightning as a potential cause, any kind of lightning. The skies were clear that night. There was no weather. And we never heard from any of the people upstairs that there was lightning in the sky or anything like that. As far as archaic, the system, the guidance system was an inertial guidance system. And at that time, it was state-of-the-art inertial guidance. These were reliable systems. and they had been tested. I think it was mentioned earlier that we had gone from the Atlas to the Titan missile to the Minuteman I, and the Minuteman I was a highly reliable system. Boeing investigated everything and could not determine a specific cause for the shutdown or how any kind of a signal could have penetrated the triply shielded cables we had going to each of the missiles, triply shielded against EMI, or electromagnetic interference.
Amazing. Interesting response. Alexei, as always, great and pertinent commentary. We appreciate it. We're almost up against the next break here, Captain, but when we come back in just a moment or two from this break, I'd like very much to get to your opinion of this and what you're doing to dedicate the rest of your life to talking about these things, because what a timely story about UAPs. And when they come and mess with nuclear weapon systems, this is not the first one, and there's probably many stories. I find it very, very fascinating because, well, this type of technology, look at how dependent we are in more electronics today. And as Alexei's point, even some kind of ball lightning, as much as you had, shielded and protected the weapon system, it went down. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, your opportunity, a rare one indeed, 1-800-848-9222, or how about simply 1-800-848-WABC. The Dr. Sky Experience continues in Theater of the Mind in just a moment.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, this is Hugh Downs. You're listening to Dr. Sky on aviation and space and life.
I examined a lot of CIA classified UFO files, which are fascinating, because there was a huge UFO craze going on in America. There still is today. But it certainly started back in 1947, and by the 50s, it was in full force. A quote from author Annie Jacobson, who wrote an interesting book on that area we call Area 51. 46 minutes after the hour, Captain Salas is with us. Let's get right to it. We only have a limited amount of time with you. Your take on this, sir, after all these years. Give us your analysis. And, UAPs, they're everywhere nowadays, and they're at the top of the news.
In my second book, I identified at least 15 incidents involving UFOs over nuclear bases. And these are very well documented, supported by witness testimony and documentation. As far as I know, in none of these instances were there any serious damage to the equipment, including in our instance, our case, and the Echo flight that happened 8 days earlier. So I've concluded that these were done deliberately and by extraterrestrial visitors in order to send a message. And the message, to me, is obvious. It's to the people of this planet, get rid of your nuclear weapons. Because eventually they could be used in war and destroy every living thing on this planet.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. You bring up a good point, Captain, because let's go back to July 16th, 1945. The first nuclear detonation, Trinity, as you know very well. Again, a massive sighting of UAPs, then called simply UFOs, leading up to Roswell. There must be something to this, and I'm shocked about this, but obviously it seems like one of these things that we'll never get an answer on. Are you hopeful that the President of the United States is at least leaning toward some disclosure? Other movies like Spielberg, the disclosure movie that's supposed to come out in August, and all about these congressional hearings. David Grush has testified, as you know, and listeners may have heard the name, a whistleblower. When asked the question, he says, yes, our government has possession of alien craft and entities, meaning EBs, biologic entities. That's powerful stuff. Why can't we hear the truth? Do I sound naive?
Well, we deserve the truth, for God's sake, and the truth is being withheld from the public by, I think, a very well organized group within government, and not only our government, but other governments in the world who have had similar incidents and recovered craft, recovered biologics. And these secrets that they're holding and won't release are valuable, obviously. They're valuable in the areas of technology that they might discover, and they're also valuable in exchange, let's say, of secrets between nations. So I'm hopeful. I've been hopeful for 35 years, but like I said, this group, which I call a secrecy cabal, is very well organized, very strong, and has refused to reveal their secrets.
Amazing. Because that would be so earth-shattering, literally, no pun intended. If we could hear and see, I mean, could you imagine this on the 250th anniversary? I'm being really positive here. The president rolls out the information. Down in the, nation's capital, they have a celebration for this 250th Independence Day. And you roll out on a big tractor trailer or a flatbed the actual alien craft. And then somewhere in a building, you get to walk through and you get to see what's remaining of this EB entity, not as a sideshow, not as something like a Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey circus. But I wonder how people would react to that. I mean, some people say, oh, I'm waiting for this. I know that this is real. But I think there's also people that would find this to shock many of the systems in the world, the financial world, because what if these powers that have from the other, universes or other solar systems have the ability to say we don't need to depend on fossil fuels anymore, if that's not a correct description, and that we would have this ability for unlimited power, just like many of the movies of the 1950s. The Day the Earth Stood Still was more of a peaceful movie about aliens coming to the Earth and sharing technology, but we were too stupid, I hate to use the word, to pay attention in the movie to people that came to help us. It's amazing.
Yes, I hope you're right, but I want to see it happen.
I agree. So tell me how you spend your time in this. You go around and speak about these subjects. I'm sure you're in popular demand until we can ever get to the truth on this. Tell me how you spend your time as a retired captain. Mm-hmm.
Every opportunity I am offered to speak about this, I will speak out. I'm committed to, till as long as I can speak and move about, I'm committed to telling the public the truth. And this is disclosure. What I am telling you is the truth, and it is disclosure from a public citizen.
You bet. Let's go on the line here. Sorry to cut you off, Captain. We got one more opportunity. Line number one, Tom from New Jersey. He wants to chime in. You've been patient. How you doing there, sir? And your comment.
Okay. I just want to make one comment here, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead. We have limited time, but go ahead.
I don't know why a lot of people are so surprised about alien life coming to Earth, because it is a fact that alien life has been coming here doing their business long before civilized man has ever been here. Yep. And it's very hard for me to understand why a lot of people don't get it. They think, oh, they're new. Oh, they're coming. They've been here long before we ever got here.
See, Captain, there's somebody out there with this vast audience that thinks like we do. So your final comment on this? This is amazing. Tom, you bring some good conversation to the radio.
Well, I'll give you an example. I agree with him. I don't know how we can prove it, but I'll give you one example. I visited Italy. Actually, it was the city of... it wasn't Venice. It was
north of there. I know there was a UFO supposedly
anyway,
during the. Yeah, go ahead.
at one of the museums, there is a painting that was done in the 15th century, and it clearly shows, the Virgin Mary and the child, Jesus, and clearly shows a UFO in the background. Now, this was in the 1400s that this thing was painted. The Palazzo Vecchio is where it is located.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And so, to me, that says a lot. Yes, I agree.
It sure does. Let's go to the last caller of the hour here. Let's go to Don from Long Beach. You've been patient. We only have a couple of minutes, so you're on the air.
Yes. Good evening, gentlemen. My question is, have other countries, and you kind of answered that just now, experienced UFO, the same phenomena over their nuclear facilities?
Yes. There's a good video out called it's about Schosterberg in the Netherlands, about an incident that happened in the, I think it was the early 90s, over Schosterberg Air Base, which was a joint U.S.-NATO base with the Netherlands, the Dutch, and UFO comes over one night and flies slowly down the flight line and shines a beam of light at locations where nuclear weapons are stored. This was seen by over 12 military people. They actually came forward and spoke on the radio within a week after it happened. It's well documented. I think it's called the UFOs of Schosterberg.
Very interesting comment, Don. You bring up some good points, and thank you for being with us on the Dr. Sky Experience. Time rules here. I want to give you the last minute or two to explain. Again, I would recommend people get a copy of your books, one called Faded Giant. You can easily find that, I'm sure, wherever good books are sold. And what is the other book before we close out here in about a minute and a half? Go ahead, sir.
It's called UAPs and the Nuclear Puzzle. And that's my most recent book. And again, you can go to my YouTube channel. It's Robert Salas at Giant Head 3 YouTube, and you'll see a lot of video on there, including a talk we gave in October of 2021. It goes back to 1945. Even before the first atomic bomb explosion, but this was over Hanford Nuclear Facility. And you'll see a videotape of a witness who was a Navy pilot who chased these things over Hanford.
Captain Salas, it's a real honor to have you here, and I hope we do this again as you hopefully get to the disclosure, as many of us want. And the summation of this hour, from my perspective, not as important as his, is that UAPs do not want us messing around with nuclear weapons. And that's interesting. Who's behind it? We need to see beyond the curtain. And I do appreciate your time, sir, here on the Dr. Sky Experience. What an honor to listen to someone who's testifying here because he and his group saw something that literally, the words I use are not powerful enough, otherworldly in many cases. Not the planet Mars, not EMP testing. This was back on the 16th of March, 1967. Captain Salas, you're always welcome here, and thank you for your service to the United States.
Thank you, Dr. Sky, for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, a quick Sky Report. We continue in hour number 2 with another great UFO researcher. Dr. Kevin Randall will come and join us just shortly. He has lots of things to say, and we're going to get into an investigation as far as what's going on with the so-called missing scientists, the ones that were shot dead, and other people in the aerospace and military-industrial complex, all leading to some sort of answers. Is that really fact or fiction? No. Those that were shot, that's very sad. But the missing scientists, the beat continues. But our brief Sky Report is, as you look overhead, as the sun sets, the planet Jupiter, now 450 million miles away, easy to see, even in city lights. The planet Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, shines brightly in the west-northwest, easy to see. Get set for the beautiful full moon, this one in April, called the full pink moon, April the 1st, at 10:12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the full pink moon, as it heralds in on the calendar a story about the dates of Passover and Easter. Easter is chimed, of course, the first full moon, the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the vernal equinox, the beginning of spring, the next full moon, and the next Sunday is April 5th, and we also celebrate with our Jewish friends as we move into the Passover season. More on the Dr. Sky Experience, and thanks to our helmsmen, Tony and Bill, making sure you can hear what you want to hear as good as you would expect it. We'll be right back.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hour number 2, ladies and gentlemen, the Dr. Sky Experience. We continue as we talk about many subjects from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, occasional celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. As we continue with tonight's adventure, digging deeper into the UAP controversy, the story of UFOs, when will disclosure, if ever, come to us here on People on the Planet, on planet number 3? As we call this Theater of the Mind, and we thank our helmsmen, both Tony and Bill, navigating the powerhouse signal, yes, from the center of the universe, New York City, to the nation, the world, and out to the cosmos. We continue in force, but the phone number, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to get in on the conversation, it's very simple. 1-800-848-9222, or even more convenient, 1-800-848-WABC. Let's welcome to the microphone, no stranger to the media when it comes to discussing the subject of ufology, Dr. Kevin Randall is an American ufologist, science fiction and historical fiction writer, and a military veteran. Within the UFO community, he is often regarded as one of the most preeminent experts on the reported crash of a UFO near Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947, and as an author of many amazing books on this conundrum that continues to consist about, whether we'll ever be told the truth. He and I share a commonality. For 25 years, I was the Monday night guest, the news part of a contribution to Coast AM, and Dr. Kevin Randall continues to do that on the big station there and around the nation as he continues with Coast to Coast. Dr. Randall, thanks for joining us. Thank you so much for being here.
And thank you so much for the invitation. Appreciate the offer.
Always an opportunity. Talk about your background quickly, because we want to set the stage, as we had Captain Salas just before you talking about his book, Faded Giant, an experience that I still find most amazing back in '67, when, of course, something, as he describes it, a big red ball of light, it broke through the perimeter, it didn't follow the military protocol of deadly force might be used, and it summarily shut down an entire flight of Minuteman missiles. Your background in the military, tell us about it before we continue.
Well, I started out as a helicopter pilot and aircraft commander in Vietnam for a year. Stayed with that until I was discharged under President Nixon's reduction in force. Went to the University of Iowa and studied Air Force ROTC, spent some time in the Air Force, eventually as an intelligence officer, got out of that, and after 9/11, joined the Iowa National Guard and deployed to Iraq as an intelligence officer, battalion intelligence officer. Finally retired in 2009 as a lieutenant colonel. I've studied a lot of stuff in college at the University of Iowa, the American Military University, and California Coast University, eventually culminating in a PhD. I've been writing about UFOs almost from the day I started college. In fact, I often say that I went to college on what I called the Saga Scholarship. Saga was a men's magazine from the 1970s, and they had a publication called UFO Report, and I wrote for that, and it do one story a semester, and it almost paid my tuition. So I got through college that way, writing about UFOs, and have been studying the phenomenon since I was in high school.
Well, tell us, Doctor, what was the tipping point? I mean, we talk about military intelligence, and now we're talking with you about this great subject of, UAPs now, the fancy term for old UFOs. What was the tipping point? I mean, what got you really motivated? Because it's highly unusual, or maybe not, that people in the intelligence community would want to get into that side of the debate or the conversation.
I was always interested in UFOs, and I always blame my mother for that. She took me to the movie Earth versus the Flying Saucers when I was a little kid.
Oh, my favorite.
Got excited about that. The one thing I remember about the that time frame, and they're always talking about, well, the UFOs are just hazy blobs of light in the distance with no real definition. And a friend of mine's mother had seen a UFO, and I went to interview her. It's a high school student. I went to interview her. And the only question I really was interested in getting an answer to was it well defined? Did it have sharp, clear edges? And she said it was hovering about 200 feet over the barn, and she had a very good look at it, very well defined, not a blob of light, but clearly a saucer-shaped craft.
Amazing. Interesting stuff, like you said, from military intelligence to discussing the amazing world of UFOs. You know, this is fascinating in the hour that we have. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, your questions to our special guest, 1-800-848-9222, or simply 1-800-848-WABC. How convenient, right, Dr. Randall, as we continue to talk about this. The thing I've learned about you for so many years, and listening to you, of course, on your programs that you do weekly, and the other things you do, describe to us, you have a website podcast that I'd like you to share with the audience in case time runs out for the hour. How do people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about what you do?
Well, I'd done a podcast radio show on the X-Zone Raider Network for a long time, but had to give that up because of health issues. Okay. But you can still access it on my blog at kevinrandall.blogspot.com. There's a player off to the side, and I think there's like 200 hours, 200 shows that you can listen to, and it's everything from very skeptical points of view and skeptics talking about UFOs to the other end. I interviewed Calvin Parker, for example, from the Pascagoula abduction not too long before he passed away. So it's ranging from let's take it into the skeptical room, let's talk about these cases that are completely inexplicable.
Well, let's do that. Let's go back to in our time machine, October 11, 1973, as you know best, in Pascagoula, Mississippi. What's the story there, and why should people want to hear about this? And I want to hear about it. But it's amazing. You spent a lot of time doing the research and knew the individuals. Describe this. This is an interesting story in ufology.
The men, and I've never understood the dynamic there, it was Calvin Parker, who I think was 19 at the time, and he was with Charles Hickson, who was about 40. They were fishing on the Pascagoula River when an object came down behind them. Creatures, beings, robots came out of the craft, took them in the craft. They were subjected to medical examinations and then put back onto the river. They went to the sheriff to report this, not necessarily directly, but got to the sheriff's office and were interviewed by the sheriff. And what was interesting is they left them in the room alone, but didn't tell them there was a recording going on, and expecting them to talk about the hoax or how they were participating in it, and they talked about something else. They talked about the event itself being real. I've always been of the opinion, the problem is we have no witnesses about that. And I was talking to Calvin Parker about this, in fact, on the radio program, and he said there were witnesses who saw the craft, and I said, but they always came out later. I mean, it was years later we learned that there were witnesses to parts of this event. And he said, no, they came out right away. And there's a document out there dated, I think, October 12th, which was the next day. Hickson and Parker were taken to Keesler Air Force Base, I believe, because they wanted to see if there was any radiation or anything like that. And there's a document that was printed by the Air Force, a number of high-ranking officers who interviewed him, and in that there's a discussion of people who witnessed the event that day, on October 11th, and we have the names of those people. So it's not just these guys talking about being abducted, but now we got eyewitnesses to the thing who were involved in it the next day, and then over many, many years, others were found. Philip Mantle and Eileen Scott, Dr. Irene Scott, wrote a number of books about the Pascagoula investigations in cooperation with Calvin Parker, and lists a number of witnesses who they found later on who witnessed parts of the abduction or seen the craft in the sky and that sort of thing. So we have an abduction case that is not just you have to listen to the witness. There's no other eyewitness corroboration, and yet we have that, and we have that documented. So it becomes a very important case because of the additional witnesses.
I got to ask you this, Pascagoula in that area, am I correct in this assumption? I don't like to make too many assumptions, that there's also a large military presence of shipbuilding in that area. Is that true also, as we're trying to tie in a lot of these sightings, as we had our previous guest talking about UAPs seemingly hovering around nuclear sites, nuclear missiles, nuclear power plants. Are they building ships, or were they doing that? Is that possible correlation to connection that something was watching and observing? Who knows?
Both Hickson and Parker worked at a shipyard in the area.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I'm not sure if they had military contracts, but the next day, which would be October 12th, people started showing up. There were all kinds of phone calls into the shipyard that kind of annoyed the owners and that sort of thing. Jalen Hynek from the Center for UFO Studies, and Jim Harder from APRO showed up to interview them, Hickson and Parker, using both just talking to them and hypnotic regression to get additional information from them. And there was investigations by the military. They were given lie detector tests. I'm not sure that Parker ever took a lie detector test, but Hickson did. And I know Philip Klass, when he attempted to explain the whole thing, the chapter in his book about the Hickson-Parker abduction was mainly questioning the credentials of the polygraph operator. It wasn't about what they'd said or what they'd seen. It was how we can't really trust what this guy said because he hadn't completed his training, which, of course, he had. He had not submitted a number of polygraph charts to the school to get his complete certification. And why did they go to New Orleans to get him when there were other polygraph operators closer at hand? But Pascagoula isn't that far. Well, Pascagoula isn't that far from New Orleans. But in New Orleans, there was and I forget the name of the detective agency that had an office in Pascagoula, and that was how they ended up in New Orleans with that specific polygraph operator. They had talked to other people, not they, but the people investigating, and talked about other people doing the polygraph examination, but they refused to do that. They didn't want to get involved in it and that sort of thing. So they went to this place, and it really doesn't matter how good the polygraph operator is. The point should be, let's talk about what Hickson and Parker saw and what happened to them, as opposed to, well, we don't believe the polygraph examination is of any value because the operator wasn't as qualified as he could have been. It's kind of diverting the conversation. And this is a trick that had been going on for years. Back in 1957, November of 1957, there's a series of sightings in Levelland, Texas. Craft seen close to the ground, stalled car engines, was in the area for 2 to 3 hours. There's literally dozens of witnesses to this thing. And when you look at the investigation conducted by the Air Force and the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, which was a civilian organization based in Washington, D.C., the argument diverted it to how many witnesses there were, not to what the witnesses were talking about, not to what happened, but how many witnesses were there to this actual object? Turns out the sheriff was involved. He saw the object. His car was apparently stalled, as was the car that was following him, which was the Texas Department of Public Safety, and behind them was a car full of Air Force officers that got close enough. There were landing traces on the ground, multiple witnesses seen all over the place, and yet the argument degenerated into how many witnesses actually saw the craft.
That's amazing. Dr. Kevin Randall joins us, ladies and gentlemen, for the hour 2 of the Dr. Sky Experience. Our mission here, opening up our minds of the great mysteries of the universe, talking about the subject of UAPs and the great legacy that people have, like Dr. Randall, and our special guest in hour number 1, Captain Robert Salas, United States Air Force. This is interesting. I want to go back in time for a clarification for the audience. When we talk about close encounters of a certain type of kind or a kind, can you describe simply to the audience what the numeric, encounters are? like a encounter 1, encounter 2. Describe that, because it's interesting. If you're talking about these two guys in Pascagoula seeing a robot-looking being or something, describe what those encounters are. I mean, there's a close encounter of the first. How does that work?
This was a system designed by Alan Hynek. Close encounter of the first kind is you see a UFO.
Mm-hmm.
Close encounter of the second kind, it's landed. Close encounter of the third time, occupants are involved. Now, people have expanded it into additional close encounters, like of the fourth kind, which means it's an alien abduction. Ooh. But originally, it was just the three close encounter of the first, second, and third kind, and of course, the famous movie by Steven Spielberg, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which related his those experiences in in the movie, the experiences of the characters and their relationship to UFOs.
That's amazing. Doctor, a long time ago in college, I remember we had a short interview in the old days when reel-to-reel tapes were used to record different interviews. We had a short interview with Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and I'm telling you the truth, and no reason not to tell the truth, but that was an interesting man, and I was just a kid then, and I'm listening to this guy because of the movie, and I'm so fascinated. I mean, your view of him, I mean, how serious was he in the Blue Book Project for people that don't know, and some of the other things about J. Allen Hynek that you could pass on to this audience?
I actually worked with him on a couple of investigations.
Wow.
So I knew him, but I can't really say I knew him well, but I knew him. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting is he was hired by the Air Force back in, I think it was probably in 1948 when the official investigations began, as the consultant in astronomy, and they kind of expanded into him being their civilian investigator on many, many cases. And he stayed with that up through the end of Project Blue Book, I believe. So he was on the Air Force payroll. And for the longest time, he was a complete and total skeptic. He figured there were terrestrial explanations for all these UFO sightings, and you had to gather just enough data so that you could identify what the object really was. Yes. He got to the point where he was investigating the Socorro landing that Lonnie Zamora, the police officer in Socorro, New Mexico, saw the object actually very close up, saw alien creatures from outside it scrambling back inside, and the thing took off. He investigated that case, and that kind of changed his perspective into the UFO phenomena, began his thinking that there was something more to it than misidentifications and hoaxes and illusions, that sort of thing. So he became then changed into, I don't really want to say a believer because you don't want to pin that label on a scientist, but he became very interested, and he was more open to the idea that it was extraterrestrial visitation than a lot of other scientists were. The interesting thing, he did a survey, I think back in 1952, of astronomers, specifically astronomers, about their opinions of UFOs. And a lot of them said, well, I'm kind of interested in it, but I don't want to say anything because that would look bad and I'd be ridiculed by my colleagues. One of the people that Hynek talked to was Clyde Tombaugh, who had discovered Pluto.
Yeah, and he was a professor of mine in college. I remember him. I mean, what a nice man. And he obviously had so much to say about this subject, and you obviously know more about it, but he was a hell of a nice guy to get along with and talk about Pluto and other things.
I've actually got a copy of his I think it was NICAP report on his sighting. Dr. Donald Menzel at Harvard was, of course, a complete skeptic. So he's answered what Tombaugh saw. He says, well, there was a light haze, and it was a reflection of windows in the sky. I'm thinking, am I going to believe this Harvard guy who wasn't there, or am I going to believe the guy who is an astronomer, familiar with the sky and how those things work? Am I going to believe what he says? I'm going to believe Tombaugh about what he says because he was the observer. He wasn't some guy trying to explain it, because we know there's no such thing as UFOs, and therefore anything that suggests otherwise must be wrong. So,
ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kevin Randall joins us for the hour. What's more important than that? You, ladies and gentlemen, out there in our theater of the mind, as we like to call it, Dr. Randall. It's 1-800-848-9222, or simply the convenient number, 1-800-848-WABC, as we continue to take your questions and comments. In the short time we have with you, Doctor, I want to jump in on this subject. I had a chance to talk to this gentleman, as you've written a book about him, Encounter in the Desert, the story of the Socorro UFO landing back on, April 24, 1964. That, to me, is one of the most bizarre stories I've ever heard. Please tell us in short, what was that all about? You described the police officer, and what happened in Socorro, New Mexico?
Well, Lonnie Zamora, as you mentioned, was a police officer. He was chasing a speeder through Socorro, New Mexico, which, by the way, at that time wasn't that large. And he heard an explosion or a roar and thought a dynamite shack that was on the outskirts of town had blown up. So he broke off the chase and went to look for it. And he actually left the road and he was driving over the terrain there, and he came up over a rise, and down below he saw an object that looked like he thought was an overturned car. And he continued on down, and as he got within about 50 yards of the thing, he saw that it was more of an oval-shaped object on four legs sitting there, and two beings in white coveralls outside it.
Wow.
They saw him. They ran around behind the object. There was a banging, like they slammed their hatch, and it lifted off in a roar of blue flame and disappeared into the distance. Left the landing trace marks, of course, from the landing gear. There was burned areas underneath where that blue flame had been. Within minutes, his friend, Sergeant Chavez, state policeman as opposed to a Socorro policeman, showed up and talked about it. Zamora had scribbled the symbol seen on the side of the craft on a piece of scrap paper, which ended up in the Project Blue Book files. He was interviewed by a number of people. And again, I was talking to Ben Moss and Tony Angelo about the Socorro case, and they said there was, people had called the police station there in Socorro, and I asked them like 3 times. And again, this is part of the interview I conducted with them on the radio show that you can find on my blog.
Sure.
And I asked them 3 times, did you see the police record? And I never got an answer. And that annoyed me because I wanted to find out what was going on. And I found in the Project Blue Book files, there's a half-page report written by a guy named Holder, I think Captain Richard Holder, who worked at White Sands. And because his duty station was very close to Socorro, he lived in the Socorro area. So he was there right away. So he interviewed Zamora. And he talks about in that report that 3 people had called the police hearing the roar of the object. Nobody followed up on that. The officer the dispatcher who took the phone calls didn't think it was important enough to write it down. Hynek's there within days. There's other investigators. There was an ICAP investigator there, the Air Force investigator.
Very interesting.
Nobody went to the police station to talk to the dispatcher, and nobody tried to find those people who had called the police. Socorro wasn't that large, and it would have been simple for them, knowing the track of the craft, to backtrack and just go ring doorbells and see, did you hear anything? Did you see anything? Nobody bothered to do that in 64.
Yeah. Sloppy investigation, and many people would say, I mean, from the law enforcement side, they would get a D for their effort if they didn't do like they should do at any crime scene or any scene like that. So you're describing something that has lots of holes and ambiguity about it, but it's an amazing story. Yeah,
the Air Force investigator should have done it. Hynek should have done it. The NICAP guy should have done it. And in fact, the NICAP guy, Ray Stanford, told me that he met a woman in one of the restaurants in Socorro right after this event took place and talked to her about it, and that she told him about hearing the roar, but he didn't follow up on that. I mean, he's met the witness, for crying out loud, which would have made the case that much stronger. Hector Quintanilla, who was the chief of Project Blue Book back in 1964, did an unpublished book about his experiences with Blue Book, and some of us have copies of it. One of the things he says in the book was he could not identify what Zamora had seen. He labeled the case as unidentified, knowing that it would excite the UFO crowd, because here's a case with a landed craft and alien creatures outside it, and they can't explain what it was. And he said in his book that he was sure that the answer was in Zamora's head somewhere, meaning there was something that he had seen that he may have forgotten or didn't understand the importance, but never communicated to anybody, that might have explained the sighting, but that never came out. So the Project Blue Book, by the way, if you reported seeing creatures from the UFOs, the case was invariably labeled as psychological problems, with 3 exceptions, and one of the exceptions was the Zamora case.
That's amazing.
I had Lonnie.
I had Lonnie Doctor on one of the shows when, unfortunately, he was not in good health, and the interview was that obviously he couldn't speak very loud. We tried our best to get the information, but we're glad we're listening to your story. A book, ladies and gentlemen, that you can get by Kevin Randall, Dr. Kevin Randall, many others. This one entitled Encounter in the Desert, going back on our time machine to April 24th, 1964. I've driven through that town many, many times, and you're right. They're known for the School of Mines. It's obviously grown as time has progressed. But in those days, it's obviously what? It was just like a one-horse town, not to be knocking horses. But that was a very small community, and the story goes on. But what we want to get to, sir, we have a few more minutes before the hard break here, and I know you know this very well. What I want to talk about in this is some of the experiences that you've had, maybe, and we'll save it for after we come back from the break, as far as the best evidence so far and the things that lead to, hopefully, someday, with the president now saying that hopefully he's given the green light to some sort of disclosure. We're hoping that that happens. Many people out there, I wonder if they believe that they were ever going to hear anything like that. And so many of the other stories that I want to talk about with you about the latest, your opinion, sir, on the retired General Neil McCasland, the disappearance of him, Monica Reza, I guess a year ago, a very serious scientist that was developing some kind of alloy called Mondaloy, and many of these other scientists that either been assassinated or missing or however. That's an interesting story, and I think if you could just tease it for the 2 minutes before the break. What's your general opinion of what's going on with those things? Tell us.
I've looked into this because I've gotten a number of queries about the disappearance of the general. I looked into it a little bit deeper. I see really no connection between him and UFOs other than speculation based simply on the fact that he headed a research project at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which was the home of Project Blue Book and UFOs. And so there's people who've drawn the conclusion that he was deeply involved in UFO research. That seems to be highly speculative. I don't know of any direct connection, which doesn't mean there won't be something found. It means to this point we do not have a direct connection from him to UFO. So it might be kind of a red herring.
Very interesting. Your questions and comments, ladies and gentlemen, that's why we have a show. You, of course, rule on the radio show here. We want you to jump in as time permits, 1-800-848-9222, and the simple dialing number, 1-800-848-WABC, as we explore the many mysteries of the universe and many other things from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. Dr. Kevin Randall is our special guest to the conclusion of hour number 2, and thank you for joining us in what we call, Doctor, the Theater of the Mind, the Dr.Sky Experience. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is the Dr.Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hello, America! Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the incomparable Dr. Sky program, one of my idols. He is a man of science.
I don't mind UFOs and ghost stories. It's just that I tend to give value to the storyteller rather than to the story itself. A quote from actor Robert Stack a long time ago. Dr. Kevin Randall, he joins us in this last half hour of hour number 2 with your questions and comments as we continue to talk about whether we'll ever have disclosure. And let's continue on that at 32 minutes after the hour, Doctor. I mean, a lot of people are saying, look, come on, all these sightings, you've done the research, people like Stanton Friedman, J. Allen Hynek, you could name, the beat goes on. What's the promise in your mind of us getting to the bottom of this? What do you think is going to happen? What do you want to happen? Obviously, we know we want
Well,
to hear.
I would like to know exactly what's going on. I would like them to come down and say, here we are, and that would be the end of the discussion.
Yes.
And I also think, based on my experience as an intelligence officer, I know that the way the government works, we've got two systems out here. The government saying, no, these things don't exist, they're illusions, and then we have the reality of the UFOs, and they could announce themselves any time. But as an intelligence officer, regardless of those circumstances, if I was privy to classified information, and this actually happened to me once, I was supposed to deny it. I was serving at Wright-Patterson. I was serving at Richards Gower Air Force Base just south of Kansas City as an intelligence officer, and I got a call from the Kansas City Star, I believe it was, a reporter there. And there was an event going on, and he knew about it from reports. I knew about it from classified sources, so I had additional information, and he was wanting me to tell him about it. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of this thing, which was a blatant lie. I had heard about it, but I'd gotten it from classified sources. And because of that, I could not tell him what I knew. And he's calling me names and this sort of thing, and I'm going, well, that's the way it goes. And the point simply is the information was out there, but I was required, because of regulations, not to say anything about it. We're in the same situation here. The beings or creatures, if they're here and they're UFOs, could end the discussion immediately by landing at the river entrance to the Pentagon or on the mall outside the Capitol, and the discussion is over. But because a lot of the information is classified, the individuals involved are required to deny any knowledge of it and say things that are just absurd on the face of them. We can point to any number of places where military, really shouldn't limit it to the military, but governmental officials have lied about what they knew about the UFOs from that sort of thing. So, but I don't think the government has any incentive to actually release the data. It's going to have to be triggered by something else, some event that cannot be easily swept under the carpet. Let's say that the Roswell crash didn't happen in the desert in Roswell, New Mexico, which was a very small town. I think they had 2 radio stations that reached almost to the city limits, and 2 daily newspapers, which a lot of towns had that. But they were kind of isolated there, and it was easy for the military to cover up what had happened. But let's say that had happened in Central Park in New York City. Well, that would have ended the discussion at that point. Had it happened in some place where it wasn't that isolated and the government couldn't control the news media as easily, then we
So we're not looking, Doctor, to have any kind of a day the Earth stood still landing near the White House or the White House ellipse anytime soon. But here's something interesting. The callers rule, as we say here on the show, and they should. Let's go to line number 1. David in Staten Island, you've been patient. You're on with Dr. Kevin Randall. How are you doing this morning?
Dr. Sky, I got off the Internet. I was looking for any information on flying saucers. I have a subconscious interest in it since I was a little boy. My mother had a round dish shaped like a flying saucer, if you have imagination, and a flower on it, a chrysanthemum, which I give the name for the potentials that I hold. There are 2 handles, one on each side. And what it is you put JADOs or little rockets in them from like a hobby shop or something.
Sure.
You can make it spin up in the air and then fall down because it can't go full function because of the way it's designed. The aerodynamics of the aircraft will not match the jets and rockets we have today.
It's amazing. A little JADO plate that flies. Dr. Kevin Randall, see, we have some very interesting and intellectual listeners like David in Staten Island. Wow. What do you say to that?
The real problem is if you're going to travel interstellar distances, a chemical rocket isn't going to do it. You've got to have another way of propulsing your craft. And, of course, the distances are so vast that it just takes literally forever to get anywhere. The probe we launched in 1976, Voyager, is supposed to come close to another stellar system in 73,000 years.
Right, and 1 light day away coming up at the end of the year. That's incredible in itself. Something still working. But, David, you get the last word on this. You talked about a home-built flying saucer with JADO rockets on it. It's amazing stuff.
And when I move, I'm going to make experiments to prove it.
There you go. Well, thanks, David, for being with us. We appreciate it. Dr. Randall, this is interesting. We're talking about this. What do you expect, or if anything, maybe you expect nothing, from Spielberg's movie that's been getting all this horsepower, and yet we still don't know much about it? It doesn't even have a definitive title other than maybe Full Disclosure. Am I making that up, or do you have more information?
I don't have any more information than you do. I've looked at the trailers that have appeared online and that sort of thing. We have to remember back in 77, I think it was, Spielberg came out with Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which got the same kind of public interest or the same kind of hype beginning before the movie came out. The movie theaters were holding seminars in the lobbies and things like that to draw people into to see the movie. Nothing changed from a governmental point of view other than, well, here's a nice movie about flying saucers. And I think that, Spielberg's movies probably be good because movies are usually pretty good, but yes. I don't think it's going to do anything to push us closer to disclosure or anything like that. It'll fire public interest, which Close Encounters of the Third Kind did back in 1977, inspired public interest, but by the same token, the government just ignored that interest and continued to deny that there was anything to the phenomenon.
Your comment, Doctor, on this one, I've always been puzzled by this, talked to many people, but let's go to you on this. The conundrum behind the Tic Tacs, David Fravor, of course, has testified, so many people have. Your take on these so-called, or I should say, identifiable by many in the military, of the Tic Tac. Describe it to people, and what's your theory on it?
Well, I've talked to a number of the people that were involved in that as well, and in fact, one of them, Kevin Day, I think it was, I interviewed on my program to talk about it. And what was interesting is the Tic Tac is what we used to call a cigar-shaped craft, I think, basically, yes. And it appeared on some of the equipment in the cockpit of the airplane, the heads-up display and that sort of thing. But Kevin Day also talked about the radar sightings, and he also talked about how the day after those sightings, a number of men in dark suits, we hesitate to say that.
The men in dark suits, yes.
Yeah,
they're out there.
But the FBI used to wear dark suits too, so it didn't do it. But they showed up and confiscated or took with them a lot of the documentation for the electronic displays that recorded these objects. So we've got that sort of thing. The Navy, of course, acknowledged that the videos that were released were Navy videos, did not say they showed extraterrestrial craft, only that the Navy, those videos were accurate. The interpretation is what was speculative. So we've got some interesting things like that. And I thought when it happened in 2017, I thought, we're moving toward disclosure. And here we are, almost 10 years later, and we have moved no closer to disclosure than we were then. What we've done is we've seen, the government's created a whole bunch of different offices to investigate it, which they had done back in 1947. We got no information from them. They deny that there's anything to it. They come out with the same idiotic conclusions that they had before, and would say things, if we'd had proper information from all of these sources, we would have been able to identify it. So there's some that we don't know what it is, but of course there's nothing to suggest alien visitation.
Interesting point. How close are we? Obviously the question that could be asked, and maybe we don't get an answer on this show about how close we are to disclosure, if at all. But talk about this for a few minutes before the next break. This is a fascinating one I've always wondered about. We hear about the U.S. talking about the so-called lead in the whole UFO UAP story. What are other nations doing, and how close are they? Pretty much in parallel to the number of sightings, and what do they say about all this stuff? Let's say Russia, China, you name the rest.
If we look at the world, there's many interesting sightings throughout the world. There was a sighting in Australia, I think it's Westfall School, where an awful lot of the students and teachers saw an object close to the ground in Australia. Similar thing in Africa. Cynthia Hines in Zimbabwe, I think it was, talked about a school landing and the kids were drawing what the aliens looked like.
Sure, I've seen the video.
There's the Bentwaters case in England, which they call the English Roswell. There's the sighting in Brazil, which is the Brazilian Roswell, and there's a Russian Roswell and all this sort of thing. So the sightings are seen throughout the world. What happened back in Australia, I remember reading about this. Somebody high up in the Australian government, Australian military, had read Don Quixote's book and got excited about UFOs, and the Australian Air Force, Royal Australian Air Force, which would be the RAAF, which could also be interpreted as the Roswell Army Airfield, but that's another story.
You bet.
Contacted our Air Force about that. They said, "Oh, Kehoe doesn't know what he's talking about. It's a lot of speculation. It's a lot of fabrications and that sort of thing." And so the Australians kind of went that direction as well. Turned out later the book that you were talking about, Kehoe had most of the stuff right, but it was an active effort by our Air Force to convince the Australian Air Force not to bother with it because there's really nothing to it.
That's amazing.
Nick Pope worked in the Ministry of Defense in Great Britain about that and had some interesting takes on what was seen. But we can look at any country in the world and their stuff. In 1946, there were the ghost rockets over Scandinavia, and these were more or less rocket-type things, but nobody knew what was going on. The theory was it was something the Soviets had done to intimidate the Swedish government, but once the Soviet Union collapsed, a number of American UFO researchers had an opportunity to look at the files, the formerly Soviet files on UFOs, and they had no idea what the ghost rockets were either. So
and now we take that break, not to cut the good doctor off, but you know how it works in the radio and television business, so we continue. Ed in Babylon, we'll get to you, and Mark from Arizona, as we continue with our last segment of hour number 2 on the Dr. Sky Experience, 1-800-848-9222, or the convenient way to get in touch with us, 1-800-848-WABC. We will be right back.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, I'm Don Isles. I worked on the software for the lunar module when it landed on the moon. You're listening to the Dr. Sky Experience.
47 minutes after the hour, we continue with our special guest, Dr. Kevin Randall. Those who have been patient, we now move into the queue on line number 1. Thanks for your patience. Ed from Babylon. How are you this morning?
I'm so happy to be in phone contact with you, two esteemed gentlemen of the air and space also. I'm a nuclear medicine technologist. In the late 80s, early 90s, there was talk about a crash in South Haven Park, Long Island. And then I had patients come into Stony Brook University Hospital where I was working, and they started talking about it, and about men going around with clipboards asking the general public around the area what they had seen and what they knew. They was trying to sequestrate information from them. Some people had seen a glow coming from the park. Some people said it was a plane crash, but some said a fire, but they cordoned off the park, and there was a lot of questioning of the general public around the area. I was wondering if your guest had heard anything about it.
Yeah, Dr. Randall, that brings up a fascinating story. Please comment.
I hate to confess, I don't really know anything about that one. I did a book called Crash When UFOs Fall from the Sky, and there's like 118 listings of crashes in there. The vast majority of them are misidentifications or single witness crashes, but there are some interesting ones that go off on tangents. But that was one that I just had not come across. I would like to say, however, I have been to Babylon, but that was in Iraq and not in the United States.
Okay. Well, Ed, really, thank you for bringing up something that, well, when the good doctor doesn't have information on it, it certainly is something that I'm sure maybe the two of you would want to continue to stay in touch. And I do appreciate your patience, Ed from Babylon. Let's go to line number 2 as time will run out of the show here before the top of the hour. Let's say good morning to Mark in our state here in Arizona. Mark, how are you? Good morning.
Great. Good to hear your voice, Dr. Sky. It's good to hear Kevin Randall. Kevin Randall, we were in Roswell in 1997, July 4th, and I believe you were a speaker there. Am I correct?
I was there, yes. I was certainly there.
Yeah, that was at that conference, and very interesting experience. We went, and we learned a lot. We spent time there. And are you familiar that L.A. Marzulli in the last 2 years has taken a gentleman out there with metal detectors? They found some remnants of things out there in the plains of Augusta.
Wow.
Oh, well, if they're on the plains of San Augustine, what they found was not part of the Roswell case.
Okay.
We can't pin down the date the alleged date of the event on the plains of San Augustine, because Barney Barnett, when he talked about it, really didn't give a date to it. We have nothing to suggest anything happened over there. Ruth Barnett kept a diary in 1947. Only year she kept a diary. Somebody given her a daily reminder book, and she kept it religiously for the entire year. And you go through that, and there's absolutely nothing to suggest Barney was involved in any kind of activity like that. Although Alice Knight, Vern Maltese, and his ex-wife were at a Thanksgiving dinner apparently in 1947, and Barney allegedly talked to them about this at that time. Again, Ruth wrote nothing down in the book about it, or in the diary about it. So I'm very skeptical about that sort of thing. Don Schmidt and I, and Tom Carey as well, have spent a lot of time researching that. There was archaeological expeditions going on. Herbert Dick was on the plains beginning on July 1st, 1947, at a place called Bat Cave, and they called it that not because Batman was there, but there were bats using the cave. But the opening of the cave faced out on the plains of San Augustine. You can see clear across the plains of San Augustine. I've got a picture of Don Schmidt standing there, and in the background you can see the mountains where Bat Cave was. They were in the perfect position to see anything going on in the plains of San Augustine, if it was a crash or a military operation to remove the craft and bodies. Absolutely nothing was seen by him and a number of other witnesses we could find. My conclusion is that was the plains of San Augustine is something of a red herring, but the other conclusion that can be drawn is, the event took place. It just didn't take place in 1947. So
well, thank you, Mark from Arizona. Not to cut everybody short here, we're interested in getting as many callers on. Let's do that. He's been patient. Line number one, Tom from Shirley, Long Island. You're on with Dr. Kevin Randall as we wrap up our show. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for taking my call, Dr. Sky, and good evening, Dr. Randall. I live not too far from South Haven Park. I've heard about that story about the alien crash, yes. And then I had the opportunity working for a contractor to work in Brookhaven National Laboratory. And I spoke to a gentleman that was one of my inspectors on the job. I knew him very well at this point. He told me that story about the wreckage, and the alien craft was actually taken to Brookhaven National Laboratory, which used to be called Camp Upton in World War I. And it's maybe only 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. So
well, Tom, you're testifying to what Ed from Babylon was talking about, right? Amazing. Yeah.
Well, Ed, Len Stringfield collected stories of UFO crashes from around literally the world. And there may be, I'd have to go back and look through his various status reports and see if there's something in there that I missed, which is distinctly possible because he's got literally dozens and dozens of reports in there. And, when I was doing the research for Crash When UFOs Fell from the Sky, I was looking at all kinds of different sources of UFO crashes. So it's one that I just missed. I don't have much information about it. I'll have to go back and look at that. Oh, do you have a date on that event?
I don't have. No, that I don't. I know it was in the 1900s. Or I would say maybe, I think about 78, 79, maybe early 80s. But I'm not positive on that.
Well, that was the time that Len Stringfield coined the term crash retrievals, and he did his presentation at the MUFON conference in 1970 about that specific topic. And the skeptics always point out, well, he wasn't impressed with the Roswell case because he doesn't mention the Jesse Marcel story. But the problem is, because of the publication requirements, he couldn't get it into the symposium booklet because he had to submit it before Jesse Marcel's story was known. And when he did his presentation, he, of course, mentioned Jesse Marcel and the Roswell case. I'll go back and look through his status reports and see if I can find anything else about it. But he's got literally dozens of cases in there. Many of them are single witnesses. Some of them are known hoaxes. He talks about the one that from South Africa in the same time frame, I think it was,
Yes, thank you. I want to say thank you to Tom. I appreciate it. Time runs out on the clock here, and collaborating what Ed from Babylon was talking about. Hopefully we can get some more information in your research, Doctor, on this particular story. So thanks again, Tom from Shirley, Long Island, for being part of the Dr. Sky Experience. We give you the last word here. We got just a few moments before the top of the hour. How do people get in touch with you, Dr. Randall? Always an interesting conversation with you.
Well, I guess the easiest way is put a comment to my blog, and if it's a personal note to me, and that's kevinrandall.blogspot.com, if it's a personal note to me, it won't be published. And provide an email address, and I'll get back in touch with you. Especially the fellows talking about this crash. If they've got additional information, it might help me pin it down.
You bet.
That would be valuable. And the books, of course, are available at Amazon, like that. But you mentioned I do science fiction under the name Eric Helm. I've done action adventure under the name Eric Helm. And I've done the UFO stuff under my own name. So there's a lot of stuff out there they can take a look at.
Well, you could take a lot of hours, ladies and gentlemen, to research Dr. Kevin Randall. So many books, so many opinion, position papers, science fiction writing, as he said. And it's always an honor to have you here, sir, because that's interesting. We share that time period. You do it currently. I did for 25 years on Coast to Coast, starting with Art, and then moving on, of course, to George. And we continue to hear you there. And we do appreciate your expertise. Again,
I think
kudos
the only difference is I do it on Thursday or Friday nights, depending on where it is in the month. And you said you always did it on Mondays. So.
We did Mondays, absolutely. Amazing stories. And a tribute to one person, really quick, we got about a minute. Your opinion, of course, counts. To Dr. Stanton Friedman. I always enjoyed sitting with him and listening. And obviously, like yourself, he was an incredible, valuable bit of information. He could go on forever, and I always appreciated him. Your quick perspective on Dr. Stanton Friedman.
We had a very acrimonious relationship.
Interesting.
I knew him very well, and we argued about stuff. I think he said repeatedly, though, we agreed on more than we disagreed on, and he was a proponent of St. Augustine. I was not, so we disagreed on that. But he said that we agreed on more than we disagreed on. So. And he, of course, did a wonderful job of promoting the idea of alien visitation.
Fascinating. Dr. Kevin Randall, always a privilege and honor. We'll do it again, I'm sure, as the listeners, of course, do tell us that they like certain guests. How do you get in touch with potential guests? It's my email, drsky@wabcradio.com. We do appreciate that. And thank you, Doctor. Always appreciate your commentary and research and books on, hopefully, one day, the answer will be disclosure. When do we get it, or do we ever get it? And that's the question that I think has been plaguing mankind for a long, long time. Thank you for your time, sir. We appreciate you.
And thank you.
Always a pleasure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we talk about the last Saturday of every month, we do a pre-record because my duties take me as the MC of a dinner cruise that's here in Arizona, which is on the Dolly Steamboat. If you're ever out in Arizona, by the way, the temperatures locally in New York now, 37 degrees. Here, still in Phoenix, 78 degrees. But we had a horrible 102 degrees today. That's not March. It's going to go out like a lion for us, and hopefully it goes out peacefully for you. But ladies and gentlemen, it's dollysteamboat.com if you're ever out here in Arizona. A journey into Arizona's Junior Grand Canyon, as we call it. A wonderful meal. We do our laser show there. We show you the wonders of the nighttime sky. And if you really want to see some dark skies, it might be a good opportunity for you and your family to join us. So we are pre-recorded the last Saturday of every month. And again, many thanks, a shout-out to the amazing story here behind WABC, to John Katsimatidis, and of course, from the executive staff, to Chad Lopez. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for Walter Sterling on Another Side of Midnight as we pass the torch of conversation from me to him here, as he's another proud member of the WABC family, and thanks to our helmsmen, Tony and Bill, for making it happen.